Hello, I'm Daniela. Now, I normally talk about slow stitching videos and different types of artwork like art journals, but today's video is just slightly different. I'm going to show a slow stitching piece, how I created it from start to finish, but instead of focusing on the actual creation of the piece, I'm going to show you about my creative process, how I get my ideas, how I'm inspired by different things, and how it comes to fruition with the final piece. It's kind of a winding road, a long, convoluted place, but I thought you'll get the idea and you'll really like to see what I do. So what I start with is just when I have some artist block or I'm kind of burnt out, I'll start with something to become inspired by. Now, we all have different things that inspire us. Inspiration is just that spark that we're looking for. It can come from just a chat with a friend. It can come from a nature walk, watching a movie, reading a book. There are many ways to spark creativity. And all we're trying to do is create an interest in something that didn't exist previously, or maybe it did and it's reignited. So that's the inspiration that we're going for. Now, one thing that tends to always work for me is a walk in nature, or a hike, or sometimes even a game of tennis, because it's outdoors. And that's the key for me. And it took many years for me to get to that point to realize that something so simple that I take for granted can really spark that energy. So on my walks, I'll see something, perhaps something new, or something that I hadn't seen in that same light before. It could be a plant or an animal, anything really along the way. It could be the way the light comes through the trees and casts an interesting shadow. It can be a degrading leaf. It really can be anything. My specific example that I'm going to talk about, I went to a nature park. It's one that's fairly close to me, and it's open to the public. It's very user-friendly. You walk around at your own pace, and you never really know what's going to be there. They have some birds that they're rehabbing that have been injured, and they'll just remain there for the rest of their lives. And this was very interesting for me. Now, I took a lot of pictures when I was there, mainly because it was so interesting. I wanted to document it, and the day was beautiful. So my purpose in taking the pictures was really just for myself. I wasn't trying to spark interest, although I was hoping that would happen. So either way, I knew I'd have a really nice day by walking outside and doing things that interested me. So around the nature park, I saw the birds. That was my go-to. I always loved to go see the different falcons and the eagles. And then walking around, I stumbled upon a little turtle pond. And it was quite beautiful. I'll put the links below to the site in case you want to go online and take a tour and see the place yourself. Maybe it'll inspire you as well. I continued walking around the park in the old canopy underneath all the vegetation. Some of it was groomed really well, other was just groomed enough to forge a path through. And all of this was inspiring. It was also very hot. So I had all these different things rolling through my mind, trying to stay a little cooler than I could, looking at all the different things. And so eventually I just kind of gave up thinking about being inspired by things and just took in everything around me. My mind quieted down and I was able to process things even though I didn't intentionally know what I was doing. I kept snapping pictures as I went, and then when I got done, about 40 minutes later, I was done, so I left. Now, I had a great time. Now, I could talk a lot about the birds and the turtles that I saw, the path that I took, and the views that I had, the people I ran into. So all these things helped spark some of that energy, and it was very enlightening. So at this point, I'm really inspired. I have the beautiful sunshine, the nice nature, the walk outside, the exhilaration from getting my blood pumping. But now I wanted to implement some of my ideas. Now at the implementation point, everything starts to change. You're no longer just taking in the sights and just acting and behaving just because. Suddenly you're being critiqued by your inner voice. So at this point, I do what I call a mind map. I just take a piece of paper, I make some simple sketches, and I put together a piece that kind of sums up my exploration, my inspiration. So I record different things. I start recording the things that were most obvious to me at the time, like the birds and the turtles. But then I'm thinking about there were some other things, like I really like the blue of the water, and I like the canopy. And I happened to remember that there was a butterfly garden. I didn't explore it at the time, so I'll intend to go back there to do that. But it stayed in the back of my head, and I wanted to record it because that was something that really intrigued me. So now at this point, I've started my implementation. The little critique is coming out, starting to say that my drawings aren't good enough. So I just let that happen. I reasonably know there's nothing that I can do to stop those inner voices, but I do want to power through and create that mind map. So then I'll take some time to color it in, go over it with marker, add some fun touches, because that's what I like to do, and that's my pleasant way of implementing my idea. Now at this point, I've made a bunch of mistakes, I've erased, I've started over again, and that's part of the process. You start in one place, you try again, you fail, you succeed, you fail again, and you just keep going. So now that I have my mind map down, that's like stage one. It's very simple for me. My next stage is to go to my sketchbook. Now, my sketchbook is just something personal that I do for myself. Again, those inner voices, the critiques come out saying the drawings aren't good enough and all that. It's not to proportion, it's not exact, and have you fact checked this? It doesn't matter. I power through and I create all those pieces that I want on that journal. And I start with one drawing of a turtle. Then I decide I really like the drawing, but I want a different angle, so I add another angle in. And then my brain just goes to the turtle shell, because that's so beautiful, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be everybody's. But this is my page, and I can do what I want with my page. So I add the sketches. I start coloring them in. Now I look at reference photos, but I don't have to make it look like a photograph. I can add fun colors. I can add unexpected colors. I can make crazy patterns. This is my work after all. And then from there, just because it's my type of personality, I start researching the things online. I research turtles. I find out about their shells, because this is what I'm drawn to. So at this point, I could tell that the turtle shell was of interest to me. And then I thought, this is what I'm going to do with fabric. And this is what I want to stitch into my piece. So I studied the turtle shells a little more, just in generic terms. Now I learned that there are land turtles and there are water turtles. And the difference is basically the webbing in their feet. At least that's one of the most visual differences. But I was really interested in the shell. And in the shell, I found out all those sections are called scutes. And turtles typically have 13 scutes. Well, I went back to my drawing and just out of curiosity counted how many scutes I put on my drawing, and sure enough, I put in 13. Total coincidence. I can't take credit for that. It just seemed to fit while I was making the drawing. So that was really interesting to me, so I recorded that fact. And then I wanted to know a little more about the scutes. So I researched that further as well, and I found out that it's made of keratin. Now, all these things are irrelevant to my sewing, but they were interesting to me, so I kept going with that. I kept diving deeper. I took the inspiration I had from my walk in the park, realized I was interested in turtles, realized I was interested in their shells, and that I wanted to know more. So from there, I created a sketch of a turtle shell. And then I said, this is what I'm going to sew. So I made a template just with some cardstock. I made the shape of the turtle shell. Didn't have to be perfect, but I knew I wanted to make it large. And then I found a backing, and I thought, I'll make a page, and I'll start a book, and this will be the first page in my book. So I created that turtle shell to fit that page. I recorded the measurements of the page so I could add more pages in the future. And then I created that turtle shell with that template. I cut out the piece for the turtle shell, and then I wanted to make the inside, the scutes. So I created a template for that as well. So then I decided I needed to cut out that template so that the 13 scutes were easy to trace, especially if I wanted to do multiple versions of these shells. Now I've only done one so far, but I am intrigued and I think I'm going to do more in the future. The fabric that I chose, which is part of the exciting and inspiring process for me, is upholstery fabric. It's very thick and it's very woven, and when I cut it, it frays. So this is something that typically has to have a nice seam or finished edge, but I didn't want to do that, so I didn't. I just cut it up and stitched it down. And therefore I have my piece, my turtle shell. I decided I was going to stitch it down to my backing page, and I stitched it down and I stuffed it with 2 layers of batting. I wanted that turtle shell to be kind of domed, like a turtle shell. Now it's very minor, but I achieved what I was going for. I spent some time stitching all the scutes down, stitching the shell down, making some decorative stitching, and then I just added a few things to the page. I'll probably add a few more in the future, but for now, it was good enough to show you. And by good enough to show you, I don't mean that my work was fantastic. I mean the process was documented, and I'm very pleased with the process that I have. So this video was an attempt to show you my process from inspiration to implementation of a process. I get asked a lot, how do you get ideas? And ideas, I think for me, well, I have ideas all the time. I get ideas in the grocery store. I get ideas in the shower. But implementing them, well, that's another animal altogether. And for all the ideas I have, I only implement about 1% or 2%. I'm curious about you, though. Do you find that you implement most of your ideas? Do you get stymied and aren't really sure how to implement your ideas? Or do you have a definite process that works for you? Please say so in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.